Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is December 18, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Joel Selvin. Wait, say your last name, Joel. Joel Selvin, right?
That's right.
Selvin, what a great name. Okay, where in the heck you calling in from, Joel?
This is San Francisco, California.
I'm in Venice. It's an honor and a pleasure. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Health.
Beautiful. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I like reading.
Yeah. Hello. I'm a reader too. Did you become a reader mainly because your parents told you to, or they did it as an example, or on your own?
Yeah, there were tons of books in the house, and at a very early age, I used to accompany my mother to the public library. That's where it started. The idea that you could walk out of there with any book that they had and read it was intoxicating.
I love it. I love libraries. They're my office, basically. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, it's in the nature of civilization, right? I mean, that's what we engage in as a collective group, and it's in our instincts to do that.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Yeah, both ways. Sure, emotions create thoughts too.
Yeah.
You can't parse those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of my questions are either or, and it doesn't mean that it's those two, but it's just jumping off points. So this is fun. Thanks, Joel. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
Do.
Yeah. Well, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So
I understand that phenomenon, having been the author of some 5,000 newspaper articles that were composed in sort of a hurry.
Yeah.
And quite frequently, I wouldn't really know what I was thinking about or what my experience at a concert was until I read the review in the newspaper.
Yeah. Amazing. Can humans think without language?
That's a LSD question.
Well, you like your hunch, your guess.
I had a psychedelic pediatrician that treated my daughter, and I remember her being in prelingual, um, 2, 3 years old, that area, and him talking about how thoughts formed in this gaseous cloud, and as soon as you touched them with verbal, they changed completely, but that you could feel the thoughts before you translated them into words. And I remember looking at Jim and saying, golly, how much acid did you take, Jim?
Well, your general, that was beautiful, so well put and articulate. I really felt I could understand what you were saying. And I'm curious, again, it's stupid question. I know it's both and it depends, but your hunch again, your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I told you earlier, you can't parse those things. You
Yeah.
really can't. They are all part of the same thing.
Yep.
And you can't take your thoughts and say, these are my thoughts, and you can't take your feelings and say, these are my feelings, because they're all part of each other.
Yeah. Well, we sort of brainwashed ourselves as humans with language by inventing the word thinking and inventing the word feeling. But I'm curious, Chomsky says a language is not just words, it's culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do, Joel, when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
It depends on what the circumstances are. Language has always been the most effective means I've had to communicate. There are other means, but I just don't have those tools the ways some other people do. So when language breaks down, for me, it's been a communication breakdown, and resolving that is then becomes the issue, not making the language work.
Right. These are two questions from Alan Turing in the 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, what isn't?
Great answer. Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Well, they can talk.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Yeah, well, we know that's hard to measure, that second one, isn't it?
Yeah. Great poet Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Tools are the thing that separates us from the other species. And that's, otters apparently use tools, and there's limited examples of that. But really, that's that and verbal communication are the thing that elevate the human species. So, tools are, there's new tools every day. You just have to be open to seeing them.
Yeah. Is there one you gravitate towards?
I spend an awful lot of time on a laptop computer, don't I?
Yeah. Me too. What new toy do you suggest?
I've reacquainted myself with my stereo system. That was a gift of the pandemic. And so that's not really a new toy. It goes back to 1876. But
you mean you're playing?
That's been my toy the last few years.
You're playing vinyl records.
Back to vinyl, yeah.
Yeah. Is it true? Do you think that analog has a warmer warmth than digital?
Oh, we could talk a lot about that. So the whole essence of digital sound is the reproduction by model. They model the sounds in the digital world and then recreate them. I mean, the MP3 is a ridiculous deal that is 6% of the original file. So the remaining 94% is discarded. They consider it redundant information that they will reassemble on the other end of the transmission. Actually, what ends up is that your brain has to solve that and has to fill in the missing overtones. So what? I get this from John Mayer, the guy that builds all those speakers. He says that the MP3s keep your brain so busy solving it that it shifts the hemisphere that you listen to music from.
Oh my God, that is an amazing thing you just said, because we study that left and right hemisphere issue. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
What I'm going to write tomorrow. And worry is a strong word. I think about it, but I don't worry much. Good. Worry is a really useless exercise.
Yeah.
At one point in my 20s, I was having some great mental distress about something, and I had the two voices going on, which sometimes we all do, and one voice was hammering me about some anxiety, and the other voice said real clearly, yeah, okay, but you've never solved a problem by worrying about it. And it was like, and it was pretty much the end of my worrying about stuff. I will, of course, find myself worrying.
Yeah.
And then oh yeah, but I've never solved a problem by worrying about it. And it just just goes away.
Yeah, an epiphany. Beautiful. Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. And by artists, I mean musicians, painters, filmmakers, poets. Art as antennas of the race, like radar, they're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So, Joel, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, I'm not sure that we do. But then, of course, the answer is right in your question. Ignore the hidden effects. Well, if they're hidden, they're going to be ignored.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
All of us have moral obligation.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Not really afraid of ideas.
Beautiful. Joel, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, I do have some memory from, way early in my childhood, and it's not a very significant one or anything, but I do remember something that apparently was from about age 3, maybe 4, but as far as I can date it, it's just a visit to a Russian River resort that my aunt had in Jenner, California. I don't know why I remember it, but I do, and my brothers don't believe that I do because they dated it like 1953.
Yeah. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Well, I've never thought of it in either term.
Yeah. Can you tell me just briefly someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model? And what specifically was that impact?
Well, I was a sort of a stranger in my own family. I don't know who in my family had like some enormous impact. My father was a difficult person to establish a real meaningful relationship with, and that never happened. It was sort of a contentious thing all the way to when he was 94 and finally left this mortal coil. But and my mother was always kind and understanding with me. I don't know. It would be hard to register like what you're saying, impact. I mean, of course, I grew up in their home, and I had much older brothers that really ignored me for most of my growing up, so they didn't have much impact on me. And when I got out in the world, one of the things I did do was I sought out older male role models or mentors, I guess they came to be called. That word really didn't exist then. And got them to show me stuff. And it turned out to be very easy to find people who were willing to do that. If somebody senses you're interested and you ask the right questions, they'll answer them. And if you listen, they respond to that. So I was lucky, especially in my early days in the newspaper business, to find a number of older guys that really took me by the hand and answered all my questions and thought I was amusing and worthwhile and it gave me a little buff every now and then. And that was like guys in the newspaper business, and there were some people in the record business that also were very much in that. Well, so it was mostly, I found that kind of information outside of my family.
Joel, you mentioned the word listening. How did you develop or realize that that's one of the keys? Was just asking these guys questions or hanging around them?
I don't know, because that's a good question, Jerry. I don't know how I discovered that, because I was always a broadcast station. I always wanted to talk and broadcast. Somewhere in my early adulthood, I learned that if I listened carefully, I could gain an almost unfair advantage
Yeah.
over other people. And then I also learned it was critical in creating relationships with women. And
Yeah.
that's where, like, I was highly motivated to like modify my behavior. I found like women were much more interested in me if I listened to them than if I talked to them.
Beautiful. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
To me, it always goes back to the sandbox, that I remember being in elementary school and playing basketball during lunch and looking over at the sandbox and seeing all the girls playing in the sandbox. I didn't understand what was going on over there. I had no idea. I knew what was going on in the basketball court. We were learning about competition. We were learning about power. We were learning about verbal communication, all kinds of stuff like that. Strategy, team play, all that. I had no idea what the girls were learning. And, years and years later, when I became interested in finding out, it turned out that the lessons of the sandbox were quite a bit different than the lessons of the basketball court. And they had to do more with collaboration and imagination and more subtle sharing of power. To me, that was always like where I like could put my finger on where the twin paths of males and females were. It was like basketball court, sandbox.
Yeah. I'll give you a funny sandbox story in rock and roll history. Gail Zappa, Frank's wife, and Jim Morrison were kids playing in a sandbox together, and she whopped him over the head with a hammer.
What, was she from Alameda?
I don't know where that happened. I just know it's sort of like rock and roll folklore in the Zappa history, but
That's wild. Yeah, I didn't know
it
that.
is funny, and it's almost like it doesn't matter if it exists, but it's so funny to to go there. But onward and upwards. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, my parents were, modern Californians. My mother came from a Quaker background. My father was raised by Russian Jewish immigrants. So, like all great 20th century Americans, I don't think either of them had been in a church. My father never went to a synagogue in his entire life. And my mother never went to a church after she was a kid.
Do you pray?
In my way.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
If God exists, if there's after death, I mean, that's kind of like the sort of speculation that other people are more interested in engaging than me.
Gotcha. Do evil people exist, or does?
Oh yeah. We had one for president.
Well, the question was, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, evil can be channeled, or it can be part of character. Really, those are values.
Yeah. Well, the real hidden question there, Joel, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? I'll set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is how do you, Joel, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I understand that. An enemy doesn't exist until he's been acknowledged, really.
Yeah.
Having an enemy implies a two-way relationship. And if you're not traveling on that road, then the road doesn't exist, I don't think. I don't know. I mean, I don't know about enemies in general. Very few people in my life have had it out for me in any kind of meaningful way. Although I've had to protect myself and my position and my circumstances from time to time from other people's aggression.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you brought up that word competition earlier, and I'm curious if you think competition is more innate and more invented. But I'll set it up with Nassim Taleb's quote. He said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you don't know who really won or lost, but you can tell who a hero is and who is not.
I like heroes. That's what something that as a writer, I look for heroes because they have the quality of inspiration and the drama of overcoming adversity that make the writing come alive and make narratives relatable to other people. So I like heroes. As far as I don't really know how to go with your question there, but
But do you think competition is like innate in humans, or is it something we sort of came up with and invented?
Well, it seems to be an inevitable aspect of human enterprise. I personally really hate competition.
Yeah.
I think it's this overrated value in American life that's not shared by other cultures. And the idea that, I hate award shows, I hate all that kind of stuff that pits people one against the other and tries to measure their accomplishments or their character or whatever. To me, all of us have our own orchestra and have our own melodies, and we play them at our own tempos.
Beautiful. When I asked someone recently that, they said villains don't think they are bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And it was interesting because Bates and the anthropologist said if a criminal gets caught, do they think, wow, I did something morally and socially wrong? Or do they go, wow, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day and I got caught? So my question, Joel, is does punishment work?
Oh, I never punished my kid. I thought punishment was stupid. I thought it was empty.
Yeah.
As I was a bad kid, and growing up, I was subject to a lot of punishment, and it had no effect on me at other. It did not deter me. It did not inform me. It did not change my behavior. It just pissed me off.
Yeah. Amazing. Really well put. Thank you. And you brought up like storytelling, narrative. Great experimental filmmaker Hollis Frampton said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
My brother, the scientist, always claimed that was the thing that distinguished human beings from all other species, is that we knew we were going to die. And it certainly, it informs how we live our life. There's no question about that. The idea that there is a cessation, that there's an end that we can't account for, that has some kind of pretty heavy motivation in terms of driving us through our own narratives.
Yeah. But again, can you, Joel, forget to die?
I don't think about it a lot. In my shrink, Murray Korngold, who expired a few years ago, few days after his 96th birthday, Murray said all through his 90s, if anybody asked him, that he refused to die to satisfy the demands of some anonymous demographer. He also told me that since sometime in his 40s, he practiced dying every night in his sleep because he felt
Wow.
certain that if you weren't lined up on the right channel, you weren't going to properly exit this plane.
That's heavy. That almost reminds me of Leary saying, learn how to lucid dream. So when you die, you can guide your path for 6 minutes.
Yeah, well, Murian took his first LSD trip in 1958. He thinks that he had over 400 psychedelic experiences and stopped in 1971. So he's up there with that kind of thinking, and that was his province, that whole psychedelic realm of those guys like Leary and Alpert, and all those guys were pioneers of inner space.
Yes, inner space. McLuhan called it the interior landscape. So your dad lived till 94. Do you think, just your hunch again, do you think it was more lifestyle choice or more DNA?
Oh, it certainly wasn't lifestyle choice. There was no healthy eating habits or routine exercise or anything like that. He had a miserable final 10 years where he was pretty much covered with a blanket of depression. So it wasn't a successful final act, I don't think.
Yeah. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin at his movie theater Volta. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
The metaphors of literature and art connect through our intellect to really deep parts of our being that we can't really access that readily through just consciousness. We can be moved by symbols and objects in ways that go beyond our understanding of it. So that's the power of art, right? Is to be able to stand in front of a painting or a play or a film and have it wash over us in a way that expands who we are and what we know in ways beyond our understanding.
Yeah, I love your use of the word understanding. It's a big word that McLuhan used a lot, but he said understanding is not having a point of view. He was saying, like Pascal, the mathematician philosopher, said, in order to understand anything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that and everything in between. How do you navigate suspended judgment? You're talking about music in literature form with many books. Do you feel that having a point of view is essential, or are you more like looking for the big picture with suspended
judgment? I don't know how you could not have a point of view.
Yeah.
As this was pointed out to me a long time ago, that the idea of objective news reporting is a fallacy, because the minute you report that the president died of a heart attack yesterday afternoon, there is so much subjectivity that went into the idea of just reporting that it really, there is no objectivity. So I don't know how you can approach anything without a point of view. But then here, why would you want to?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing, is that if writing is a matter of communicating with other people and you don't share that part of you that is unique, what use is it?
Yeah. Well, it leads perfectly, Joel, into this. What was your tipping points to pursue? You growing up a reader, when did you go, I want to do that? I want to be a writer. And then what specifically, I want to be a writer. And then what specifically, I want to be a newspaper man.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever thought of writing as anything but just a natural growth of communication skills. And I always felt comfortable writing in school and out of school. But after I dropped out of high school, just shy of graduation, and went to work at the newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, as a copy boy. And I think the day I walked in there, I felt like I had found my place in life, and very much wanted to be part of that industry and wanted to work in the newspaper business. And the job that I wanted to do was to write for it. I didn't want to be an editor. I didn't want to be a photographer. I wanted to report. And I gravitated rather quickly to reporting on rock bands.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from. I was 17 years old, and the newspaper was a place where I felt comfortable pretty much for the first time in my life. I never felt comfortable in school.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into music. You just say it again.
I hated school.
Yeah. Well, I think you found your school with those mentors that you were reading and talking to. But I'm curious, we're going to get into music in a second, but a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a book?
Well, intention is a direction of efforts, and in the biggest possible sense, the idea to write a book, about something specific, and then the specifics of that story all are loaded with intention. The intention's kind of like the highway that stuff travels on, isn't it?
Yeah. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your article for the Chronicle or writing your book?
Lots. I cannot write without an audience, like journaling or something like that. It just doesn't work for me. I have to know that I'm connecting. I have to envision the connection. I have to draw those lines. I don't know what the deal is, but I marvel at people that can just sit down and just write their thoughts out and do it in some kind of vacuum of words and thinking and not having to reach out. But I mean, it's like the newspaper business really emphasized that part of it, right? I mean, you're in the newspaper 3, 4, 5 times a week. You develop a dialogue with your readers. You're writing about some of the same things, and all this becomes a kind of a correspondence almost.
But how do you develop a dialogue? You mean letters to the editor? Or, I was curious, you're reviewing for decades for the Chronicle and rock bands. Are you going to the clubs and the concerts and the people recognize you and go, oh, hi, Joel, I read this article, and you really had dialogue? Or did you sort of want to, or was more anonymous?
Dialogue, so in the pre-internet era, you got letters, you got phone calls, you listen to disc jockeys on the radio talk about you. You ran into people out there in the world that wanted to comment on it. So, you had a way of getting your feedback and picking up the other side of the conversation. Once the internet thing started, of course, like, every newspaper article came with a set of comments and reactions and stuff like that rather instantly. So I didn't have too much problem picking up the other side of this of the conversation.
Yeah. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness or human sensorium, like knife and fork extend our teeth, clothing extends our skin, like even non-tangible, like religion or philosophy might extend consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you, whether it's a pencil or a keyboard? What humanness does it extend?
Oh, those are my inner thoughts. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the things I care about and the ideas that interest me. And yeah, I mean, everything I want to say is in there. And like I told you, I've always been a broadcast station. I've always had stuff to say.
Yeah. What uh, like is the tipping point for you to gravitate towards music as your main emphasis in writing? What did you grow up listening to? 45s, AM radio, live music. What was it that really gravitated you towards specifically rock and roll and the medium that you were hearing it on?
Well,
Or
Jerry, we're the right age to have rock and roll have emerged in our lifetime as a kind of a personal bit of culture of our
yeah,
generation. And so all of us were swimming in that water in one way or another. I mean, if it was only just listening to the songs on the radio and keeping up with what was being added that week, and the excitement of the Beatles and all the British groups showing up and all that. But for me personally, the thing that truly sparked the obsession that became my life was listening to a Rolling Stones album under the influence of LSD.
yeah,
And I went out the next day and bought a stereo and some records.
yeah. It's great. You could articulate the tipping point. I appreciate that because I was raised in Flint, Michigan, born in 53, and I'm listening to pop AM radio, and I'm hearing Desmond Decker, the Israelites. They didn't call it reggae. That was just music.
It wasn't reggae.
Well, I mean, it was similar. Let's say
that was a ska record.
right. Okay, let's say they didn't.
Look, radio when we growing up was a different world. I mean, James
Right.
Brown and Herman's were on the same station.
Well, that's what I was saying, and then I would hear "Oh Happy Day" right from your Bay Area, and I didn't know I was like listening to gospel music. And then I would hear Jimi Hendrix, and then I'd hear Iggy and the Stooges and all the Detroit music, the MC5. So it was, and this was on regular. Then it switched over to the art form of FM, and the whole growth of FM radio and Tom Donahue.
Well, that's Marshall McLuhan again talking about the hi-fi stereo changeover.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing.
I haven't heard Marshall McLuhan's name drop so much in years.
Sorry. Well, Michael McClure took McLuhan to his first rock concert. It was a Bob Dylan rock concert. We could go off into that. But anyways, I wanted to ask you about music for a couple secs here, Joel, and I appreciate your time. Really, really find you to be articulate and great with words. So my friend says the 3 T's of music are theory, technique, and taste. So, theory is what chords you're hitting. Technique, how to play it. How does one acquire taste?
Well, taste is, you act like that's some kind of like definable quantity that, either you have taste or you don't. Everybody has taste. Some of it's bad.
Well, no, I know you have taste, but I'm saying
predilection. Now, what are you talking about developing an evolved consciousness around this stuff? That's just exposure. And, it's like learning to drink good wine,
Right. I that's the answer I get the most, exposure, because you gravitated towards Rolling Stones instead of, say, Pat Boone. But there's something, I think, deeper than exposure. What do you think? I mean, besides exposure, just that the word is a taste and implies your gut. What is it about humans that we do gravitate towards the genre you gravitated towards? You could have gone towards jazz or classical music or country western, but you picked rock and roll because you had your trip on Rolling Stones. But I think it's deeper than exposure. What do you think? Anything?
We all learn systems, and that's the only thing that I could think of why we take algebra, is how we learn a system, and systems exist all around us, and if you want to uh, experience, say, Indian cuisine, you're going to have to learn a whole system of spicing and cooking and food preparation, and as you learn that system, then you obtain greater expertise, more
Yeah.
discernment, more subtlety. And Wynton Marsalis, who's kind of a pompous guy, in Ken Burns's uh, jazz documentary, he said that nuance is the highest aspiration of art. I don't know about that, but
Yeah, that's amazing. And I appreciate you being honest. Because what this systems idea is important because Aaron Copland says the four elements of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. So I think that's an interesting breakdown of some of the four major elements of music.
I always divide music up into material, production, and performance. The material's the screenplay, the script, whatever you want to call it. The production is how it's assembled, how it's put together, and how it finally appears. And the performance is the human element, and
Yeah.
that's applied to the material and balanced by the production. And those were elements that allowed me to be analytical about looking at any particular given piece of recorded music.
But you generally like it's the funny joke for the Brill Building is what came first, the lyrics or the melody? And they go, the phone call.
Yeah, that's Sammy Kahn.
Sammy
Yeah.
Kahn said that.
Yeah, Sammy Kahn did a one-man show that was just absolutely spectacular, and he says some guy came running into his bungalow at the MGM lot and said, "Can you write us a song called Three Coins in a Fountain?" And Sammy Kahn says, "I'm a professional songwriter. I can write you a song called Eh."
But back to the melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. Do you gravitate more towards something when you're hearing the Rolling Stones or you're hearing the Dead or whoever? Is there one that you sort of gravitate towards? I mean, I understand your breakdown, material, production, and performance is really well thought out. That's why you were a music critic for 30 years. I mean, and you're still writing music books. You got a great system. But is there any, sort of general feeling you have? You're hearing more melody, more harmony, more rhythm, or more?
Depends on the piece.
Yeah.
Really, it does. If
Yeah.
The piece is something where the lyrics are the most important thing, that'll strike me. And if it's not, if it's vocal harmonies and melody, then that'll strike me. Really,
Yeah. Yeah, Nadia Boulanger told Quincy Jones, your music can never be more or less than you are as a human being. What does that mean to you? What is she trying to communicate?
Well, that's, again, it's so French too. But the fact is that whatever you do, write music, play music, write nonfiction, it's the product of who you are, and it is imbued with your values and your character and your experience. That's what makes it unique.
Yeah.
So that's what she's on about there.
Yeah, but actually a great drummer, I think he's from San Francisco area, Tony Williams said, if I could live my life as well as I play drums, I'd be well off.
Yeah, I know that. Well, we're all familiar with the successful as an artist, failure as a human being syndrome.
Yeah. Another McLuhan line about music. I'm curious your reaction, Joel. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
Yeah, that's probably true. It's more than that. I mean, clearly, music is so embedded in culture that that plays a great role in whatever it is, uh, whether it's Italian pop music or German folk songs. There's more in it than just speech slowed down. Uh, and in fact, in some cases, it may be speech abbreviated. So I'm not sure that's all that accurate.
Speech abbreviated. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Music's one of the few areas of communication where we can shortcut and speak straight to the intuition and the deeper parts of our consciousness. You can just bypass the frontal lobe with music.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. What's more fundamental, music or language?
They're all common to every culture. So's tattoos. So, I'm not sure what to make of that.
That's good. Can you tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh?
Oh, well, the first one comes to mind is the Hen House 5+2, which is Ray Stevens doing In the Mood in chicken plucking. That's pretty funny. But I mean, that's not really what you're asking. You're asking is can I find wit and humor in musical passages? And of course I can. In fact, laughter may be the most common open response I have to music, is when something works and fits and everything comes to that point, it'll just evoke laughter in me. And laughter as an expression of joy.
Yeah, that's the Thelonious Monk. I can hear an instrumental by Thelonious Monk and it will make me laugh.
There's the funniest piano player in the world and the master of time. Monk is so amazing to me because every other musician in the world is the slave of time.
Yeah.
Monk was not. He was the master of time.
Yep, he was not a slave to time. And my friend Duggo, you would love him. He's sort of a great artist here in Venice and a great music person. He said Thelonious Monk heard all the same notes as Charlie Parker, but only decided to play some of them.
Well, there's some Monk, went into a reclusive period at the end of his life, and didn't leave his house and didn't play and didn't talk to people. And during that period of time, some kid at Columbia University did an entire weekend of Monk's music on the radio, on the Columbia radio station. And he said that Monk was the master of the wrong note.
Yeah.
And Monk called him up, got on the air, and said, I just want you to understand one thing. There are no wrong notes on the piano.
Dude, you must have ESP because that's exactly the quote I was just going to ask you to comment on.
The great story that is, I had this band that I just loved above all other bands for a while called NRBQ.
Oh, and I know them well.
Good. Not everybody does. And they were a mission. You believed in that band, and I remember taking one of my friends to see them.
Yeah,
and it was come on, you gotta see these guys. And we went out after the show, and we're on the sidewalk outside the club. And I go, well, what do you think? And he said, man, I don't know, Joel, man. A lot of bad notes. I said, yeah, some of those were my favorites.
There's so much we could talk about because they're like the Shags meet Sun Ra in Monk's at Monk's barbecue. I mean, NRBQ were so amazing, and they were really the greatest. And you know, I always say Little Feat was the greatest American bar band until NRBQ, you know, became like the great American bar band. Like, you know, not a stadium or concert band, like a bar band.
That was their milieu, no question about it.
Yeah, really good. So Miles Davis talks about the space between notes. Can you talk about that? Like the dynamics. What is the space between? Or George Clinton says it well. He says funk is the absence of.
Well, what you don't play as often is important as what you do play. You know, it's same with a painting. You know, it's what you leave in the background and what you put in the foreground. And space is an important part of all music.
Yeah.
And I've watched people sit in the studio and try to fill up all the space. I've watched people try and empty out the space. It's a way of dealing with composition that is beyond like what notes you play, but rather what the shape of the whole sonics is.
Yeah. Joe, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? And when I say cave artist, there were cave musicians and cave dancers. We just don't have documents per se of that.
I'm sure that. Well, you know, I think art's an instinct. I think that it's that kind of expression of representing our own individual viewpoint on the world that we live in is just an inevitability of human existence.
Yeah. Yeah, and cave dance, I wanted to bring up James Brown there for a second because he has a great line. I've got a move that tells me what to do. I mean, to me, as a lyric, that's an amazing line. You know, you have a move that tells you what to do. People don't think of him and Jimi Hendrix as lyricists so much. They think of them more as, you know, great musicians.
You know, both of them were song-based performers, and the songs carry the message.
Yeah, song-based. I like that. So, Ben Ratliff, music writer, wrote recently in the book he wrote on Bill Frisell. I mean, sound as it has long functioned among jazz players, as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So me and you could hear Miles and go, that's Miles, or hear Jerry Garcia and go, that's Jerry. And, you know, he called Miles fragile and pointed. So he used two words. He called Coltrane slightly undercooked and urgent. If a writer of someone you look up to and you appreciate was summarizing Joel's sound as a writer, what two words would you appreciate them using?
Appreciate, or I mean,
you would be honored that they use these two words, or you felt they got you. You know, they got your sound.
You know, I know what my sound is. It's dense. It's it's a little bit intense. A little bit like water out of a fire hose at times. So I understand that. It's something that, you know, comes out of years of doing something, out of who you are, out of what your preferences are, you know, what you think is interesting and beautiful. I don't know what somebody would say about me that would, you know, capture that.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day about, you know, how come my Sly Stone book didn't have a happy ending, and I said, dude, you know, happy endings are for fairy tales, and I write nonfiction. There are no happy endings in life. Life does not have a happy ending.
Yeah.
And I don't feel you need one to write a story. And the truthful, dramatic, and really resonant climaxes are almost always tragic.
Yeah. That's very interesting because, the new Dylan book, he talks about suffering is, the essential part of life or whatever he says. And he just got it from Buddha, life is suffering. But I think we handle this and
I thought
you
that was
have
Hindu.
Hindu. Yeah. Okay. Hindu. Yeah. I understand.
I don't think the Buddha. I think the Buddhists think that pain is inevitable and suffering is not.
Okay. You're right. Yeah. But I'm just saying this idea of suffering. Yeah. It's like, how do you integrate them? And I think you have a sense of humor and that laughter is important. In fact, the word that James Joyce used in Finnegan's Wake that I love is laugh tears. He took the word laughter and added the A and the S. So it spells laugh tears. You laugh and you cry. That's the human condition. You fall and you get back up. So I'm curious, what's the function of laughter?
Oh, well, laughter is a reward for being alive.
That's great. Yeah, Gurdjieff said laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
Um, you know, if you can't see the human comedy, you're you're imprisoned in the human tragedy.
Yeah, but it's very well put. In McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen. He said, "Behind every joke, there's a grievance." And I'm curious your thought on that, but I would even extract the word every. Behind jokes, there's a grievance.
Yeah, it's not every joke. It's a common approach to humor because the grievance becomes the common ground that the joke teller and the audience share, so they have a platform from which to launch. But that's not the only. I mean, pure ridiculousness doesn't have a grievance. The Dada humor doesn't have a grievance behind it. I mean, there's plenty of humor without a grievance. But on the other hand, Henny Youngman's act was one grievance after another.
Exactly. And it's funny because I asked this question in the past, can satire be destructive? And my friend who wrote with Robin Williams jokes, he said, that's the job of satire. But if you do a certain cartoon in a certain country and they kill you, some people think dying is destructive. Jonathan Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Well, again, we're talking about holding up ideas, people, and concepts to ridicule so that we can understand them better.
Yeah, to improve understanding. That's really good. I know it's another binary. You're not into these, but I'm going to ask you anyways because it's my oldest question ever. Yeah, I got it from Christine McKenna, the great LA music writer. She said, what is more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction or compromise?
Yeah.
Important to what?
That's good. You're answering a question with a question. Yeah. It's just, a general philosophical question. So leave it at that. That's what this series is all about, inventing new questions. So you've accomplished a lot in your life, Joel. How do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Well, it can't be skill because I was really, I spent a lot of time developing skill, and I was on the scene before I had it. Luck is hugely important. Good luck is hugely important. And what was your third element in there?
Ambition.
Ambition. Well, you gotta have an engine. You gotta have a reason to do this stuff. You gotta have some kind of drive and some kind of desire to do things. And I'm in my life, I think, I probably have erred to that side of things, and it had to be pointed out to me that we are not human doings.
Yeah.
So it's been, for me, I always had stuff I wanted to do, and that's what my life was about, was doing things I wanted to.
Yeah, Gary Player, the golfer, says the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Was that Gary Player? I think I thought that was
It could be someone else.
yeah, it was another golf player. The more I practice, the luckier I get. Yeah.
We go to quote investigator and they might track it down. But what you brought up is something I've thought about a lot, because Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, most people love that. You know, they go, that's good. And then one person said, nope, that's bullshit. Because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. In fact, the cliche goes, if the journey is more important than the destination, if the journey is more important than the destination, then why do we have to seek or name a destination?
Well, because we have to have a path.
Yeah. But you know, the flaneurs, the people in the 20s in Paris changed the world with their art, and they just did psychogeography. They just wandered around aimlessly and drank coffee at coffee houses, and eventually changed the world.
I'm not sure that's not a destination in itself.
That's it. That's it. Right. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. You talked about this inner voice earlier. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I'm all in English. I had a girlfriend in college who was a linguist, and in her dreams she couldn't tell you what language they were in.
But really, Joel, the question is, what form is your inner consciousness in? It's more metaphorically when I say, what language is your inner dialogue in?
Well, I don't know what language my inner dialogue is in. I'm a product of my time and place, and the pretty much a fairly obvious example of a California kid my age, with terms of the experience and the values and what my life's encompassed. So those are the things that formed my inner voice, whatever they are. It's quite a bit different than if I'd been raised in New York, or 50 years earlier, or 50 years later. It's all been kind of determined by those factors. Although, of course, it had to mesh with whatever my system is, my emotional, intellectual system, which then repurposes all those influences to my own ends.
Yeah, it really follows up well, because two of my film heroes, George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Again, I know it's stupid. I know it's both, and it depends. But just again, your hunch, your inclination, is art making more self-expression, or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Depends on who you are and what you're doing at the time.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a lot of my work is very task specific, trying to tell a specific story for a specific purpose to a specific audience. But on the other hand, there's people who write with much less specificity in all those departments and create stories and atmosphere and stuff that they're not even really planning as in the kind of detailed way that I plan my writing. So really, that just is a case by case basis.
Yeah. Like they asked James Brown's drummer, architect of funk drumming, where'd you get your sound? He says, I lived in Ohio, and on one side of my house was a factory, and the other side was a train track. So it was like, boom. And the funny update was a San Francisco band, Negative Land. They told me Missy Elliott learned how to sing from car alarms.
Whoa.
And then, they asked Ginger Baker, where'd you get your sound? He goes, I was in London when they were bombing. Boom, 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 boom. So anyways, the real hidden question, then, Joel, is can art making be egoless?
Why?
That's good.
I mean, that just is pointless.
Well, I'm curious. The person who brought me to your attention, I says, I read this, and he wasn't sure if he read it from you or someone. So you can tell me, did you interview Frank Zappa?
I have.
Yeah. And so are those transcribed and available? Those
I don't transcribe my interviews. I write them for the newspaper. It's like,
Yeah.
got a little notebook, and I jot down keywords. And
right. Well, here's what he said, and you can tell me if this, because he wasn't sure if it was you or right. He says, what is a genius? And Frank said, a true genius is someone who plagiarizes and you can't tell where they stole from.
That's Zappa.
I know it's Zappa, but does it sound like it's from your interview?
No, that's not from an interview I did.
Yeah, because that's T.S. Eliot said the mature poet steals and the immature poet imitates.
Yeah, and I mean the difference between plagiarism and research. I mean, we all understand that whatever we do, we're standing on other people's shoulders.
Yeah,
and that's just inevitable.
Yeah.
So that's what Frank's getting at there.
Yeah.
We're all at the front end of world history, and we're writing it every day.
Yep. Is perception reality?
Can be.
Yeah. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I've seen impossible things happen all my life.
Yeah. Joel, tell me, please, one major element of your writing career that's changed and one major element that stayed the same in the decades you've done it.
Well, I mean, every piece of writing I've done has been contributed to my learning curve. So each one of them piles up on each other, and I gain more knowledge and everinformation and more ability. That just doesn't stop. I'm well past 50 years of doing this, and every day is another postgraduate seminar for me. The things that have stayed the same have more to do with my sort of internal desires and drives to express myself and to make my work mean something and do something.
Yeah, it's good. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh, the life is a constant evolution where information enhances your understanding and your ability to operate. And so all this has been for me just a constant changing, refracting light that goes through everything. I mean, to me, it's just such a ephemeral state. Who I am right now and who I am in a couple hours are entirely different people.
Yeah.
Well, not entirely different. That's plenty, but I'm going to keep evolving. I'm going to keep shedding skin. I'm going to keep picking up information and incorporating it.
Good. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Well, anger is, brief insanity, and it can be based in things that you can learn from and grow from, but anger is largely, wasted motion.
Yeah. Utah Phillips said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people.
Huh.
Who's entitled to make the rules?
I've never been big on rules, and that's been an issue with me in terms of the rest of society all along. Rules. I mean, there's basic things in civilization and that we have to adhere to if we're going to live together as brothers, which I assume we should.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I really I hesitate to embrace rules.
Yeah. What's the difference between rights and responsibilities?
Well, rights are entitlements and responsibilities are duties.
Yeah. What's the difference between rebellion and revolution?
A rebellion is a response, and revolution is some kind of concerted act.
Like re-evolution, like we know something's wrong and here's a new plan or a new strategy, that sort of thing.
True revolution has been very, very rare in my lifetime. There have been a lot of adjustments and a lot of course corrections, but where people just stopped and dispensed with the way things were and started something else, that's been pretty rare.
Yeah. Yeah, this socialist John Basil Barnhill says, where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty. 2005, V for Vendetta, the movie, paraphrased it and said, people should not be afraid of their government. Government should be afraid of their people. How do you personally handle false fears, like the war on drugs? Like, you can't have a war on drugs because drugs don't fight. You can't say no to drugs because drugs don't talk. This is a false fear: war on drugs, war on poverty. How do you handle these false fears?
Well, I don't know that I've ever embraced false fears. I probably have, but it doesn't really strike me. I mean, certainly, what you're saying about war on drugs, that occurred to me the first time I heard the phrase. And same with war on poverty. I mean, the war is something entirely different than what you do to erase poverty, and it's not a good combination of terminology there. So I don't know, false fears. There's plenty of real things to be fearful of in this life, in this world. Then there's a lot of panic that people try to promote in their own interests or out of their own lack of intellectual understanding. And, you have to be alert to be able to tell the difference between fears that are genuine and fears that are just fantasies that are people developing.
I like that. How do you stay alert? What do you do to stay alert? Is there
conscious? You just be conscious, conscious and informed and scrutinize what people say, so that you understand what is so you can trust the information you're getting.
Yeah. Critical thinking, scrutinize, really, really important. Joel, there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. And Bob Goldthwait morphed it into "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "Security is separated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this line, I'm not saying you, Joel, but you create what you resist, or one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Well, it doesn't ring. It doesn't ring any bells with me. Uh, my work has all been very much part of what I do, and uh, if I spend a lot of time thinking about it, I could probably get my head around that. But it doesn't really apply to my motivations or. Um, I'm not, but I'm not crafting art in that wide realm, right? I'm a music writer. I write nonfiction books about musicians as heroes, and it's kind of a limited realm.
Do you see them as illustrations for that? You create what you resist, or not so much?
I don't know that the people I write about are things I resist.
No, I mean their lyric writing. The people you write about, the content of their songs.
Well, it's music is unique to each individual who makes it. So, I've written about the Grateful Dead. That's a whole sort of kind of music that is completely different from, say, the Rolling Stones, who I've also written about.
Yeah,
And the in each case, there's different motives, different tools, different concepts, and the what you're looking for is for these streams to connect with you.
yeah. We got about 10 more minutes. I really appreciate this, Joel. Thank you so much. How do you find peace of mind?
Peace of mind. Peace of mind. Really. You know, it's overrated. And what we're really looking for is a sense of belonging and a sense of safety and a sense of security.
Yeah,
And those are the things that you can get. You can put your hands on them and you can pull them into your life. I think that when you have those things, the stuff that they call peace of mind is probably right in there. I mean, peace of mind. I don't want a peaceful mind. I don't want to have a mind that's disturbed, but I want to
yeah,
have a mind that's full of controversy and thought and provocative information and challenges. And
I agree.
I don't want to live in fear and anxiety.
Yeah,
Uh, if ridding yourself of fear and anxiety it creates a state that you call a peaceful mind, well, that I understand.
yeah. These are 5 quick questions from Alan Watts, just in a couple words. First one, who started it all?
Yeah, who did?
Are we going? Yeah. Second one, are we going to make it?
Oh yeah.
Third, where do we put it?
Oh, it'll find its own place.
Who's cleaning it up?
No, it'll never get cleaned up.
Is it serious?
Yes and no.
Very good. That was good, Joel. Couple more, we're out of here. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh, what would I say? I remember that kid. He was so hopeful for life, and had a sense of possibilities. God, I remember being that way. I was in London when I was 12, and it was quite a different world from California. And I was, of course, an American amongst English people, so I developed a real strong sense of self at that age. And he was a smart kid. He intuitively understood stuff that would take him years to intellectually comprehend. So I don't know. I'd give him a hug and a pat on the back and tell him to go to more baseball games.
Very cool. You'll love this. I asked Dr. John all these questions, and that's the only one he said, I won't go there. It was like a little too.
I wonder what Mac was like at 12.
Oh yeah, he goes, it felt like he was like, that's too voodoo for me, man. I'm not going there. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Oh, it's over. Yeah.
Why?
Big mistake. No, because you can't get it to come out easily. No, you need to be able to tug that thing and have it roll.
That's 90% of people say over, but and it's on the patent showing you over, but the 10% say under have their reasons.
It was a big beef with me and my first wife.
Yeah.
She was an under.
If a statue is built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oof. Well, first of all, I want it to be real small.
Well, I like that.
And I'm not, displayed, like a mantle or a shelf. I'm thinking Oscar size.
Yeah. And what's it made of?
Oh, yeah. What is it made of? It's hard to say. I envisioned it as some kind of cast metal.
There you go. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had and never want?
Yeah.
Visiting New Zealand.
It's good. The answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin.
Well, I'm fine with money.
Yeah. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, the thing about being in a vat of anything is you want to climb out slowly and not get it on everybody else.
Dude, you think things out and you're articulate and you're a fast thinker.
I worried about the vat thing. I had that answer, years ago, just in case it ever happened.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite answers is I wouldn't be in a situation like that. But my friend, you would have loved him. He was sort of like Damon Runyon, a really great old wise man, Altacocker on Venice Boardwalk. He taught me that question, and he sort of said it's like a metaphor for life. We're in a vat of vomit, and people are throwing bags of shit at your face. So what do?
Yeah, I ran across that at an AA meeting about 25 years ago with some guy saying you're in a vat of shit. You have to climb out slowly.
Yeah, there you go. So what three, just approximately a couple writers in your genre? I mean, this is pretty unique. These people who have lasted 3, 4, 5 decades writing about rock and roll. Are there a couple of your peers that you like that you would not mind mentioning that you?
There's so many. I mean, really, there's an awful lot of great writers that have bent down on this music thing, and I've read most of their works, and they're just amazing. The one that stands out above all others for me is the late great Nick Tosches, who just was gifted in a way that like a Gore Vidal is gifted. The rest of us are writers, and then there's Nick Tosches.
Yep, it's good. Can you name 2 others that you're fond of?
Well, Whitney Balliet was the guy that can write about music and the way it sounds, which is the most impossible task of any music writer. And he was amazing at that, just amazing. And then I'm hugely admiring of a British guy named Pete Frame, who's best known for a calligraphy that he does called Rock's Family Trees.
Oh, yeah.
But he's also written a book about the history of rock and roll in England as to how rock and roll came into England in the 50s, called The Restless Generation. And I think that is one of the finest histories of rock I've read.
What's your 3 top rock documentaries?
Well, I've made 2.
I mean, besides the ones you've made. I
Oh, let's see. The Last Waltz is pretty amazing, but the show was even more amazing that night. And
yeah,
I every time I see the movie, I'm reminded how great it was to be in the room when it happened.
Yeah.
What else is? I mean, there's so many. I mean, Don't Look Back is amazing. The Marley documentary is fantastic. Oh, the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers documentary. It's really long. It's like 3.5 hours.
By Bogdanovich, yeah.
Peter Bogdanovich, an unlikely collaborator there. But it's a spectacular piece because, to me, I just sat there and just marveled at how underrated I had been. I had underrated Tom Petty. And there just kept coming up more good music, more good music, more good music. 3.5 hours worth of great music. So that one was really, truly, illuminating to me.
Beautiful. Couple more, we're out of here. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Interesting question. I'm not sure what cultural shift is inspiring these days. These are very sort of dark and shadowy times, and the culture itself is particularly unrobust. America in particular has to shed a lot of issues right now before we can get into that place again where we're inspiring and elevating the discourse and do I see anything that inspires me? I mean, there was a while there at the beginning of the century where I thought technology was really going to turn into something really fantastic, and it's utterly failed to do that. Witness the death of Twitter and the total the emptiness of Facebook and social media in general. So I don't know. I think I'm inspired mostly these days by individuals and their efforts to raise up from the muck. In San Francisco, I was quite inspired by our district attorney, Chesa Boudin, who was recalled earlier this year. I thought there was somebody who was stepping into an arena with new ideas, with compassion, who was not really going to promote a lot of old, bad, stinky strategies. And then, of course, he got wiped out. You were asking about perception and reality. The perception in San Francisco was that San Francisco has become this horrible crime-ridden town and that our district attorney is responsible for it. And the reality is that all our any way you figure crime statistics, they're down in San Francisco. And as far as what our district attorney did, he retooled the entire approach to prosecution and the entire concept of crime in San Francisco. And it's about time somebody did that.
Yeah.
So I was very inspired by Chesa, but in this culture that we live in, he was just covered with a tsunami of public distrust and all based on misinformation. So that's where we're living.
Yeah. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, Joel, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, It's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. I'm really grateful you laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it all about for you?
What's it all about for me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't have a broad worldview on that. I wanted to do stuff I wanted to do, and that's what I've done, and I'm successful at that. I get up in the morning and I do stuff I want to do all day long, and I share my work with people, and I hope that it in elevates them and broadens their worldview or whatever. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it's what I want to do, and it's how I want to spend my time. And there's some kind of economic angle to this. We're all making a living and stuff, but really, that I don't even think about that anymore. I just want to do this work. It's crazy. I've been doing it for years now.
Yeah.
I mean, writing about rock music. I mean, what potentially less useful thing there is to do in the world? I don't know, but it's what I wanted to do, and I keep getting better at it, and I keep learning more about it. There's going to come some point where that I've reached a pinnacle. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just going to keep going on this and keep doing this. But it's too much fun, and I get up every morning looking forward to having the day I'm going to have.
It's beautiful. Frank Zappa's line was, "Don't stop and keep going." It's pretty simple. But another great writer I admired, Anthony Burgess. He wrote 8 books on James Joyce and was a musician. He wrote Clockwork Orange. He said, "We must now ask some very different questions about the relationship between music and life." And I think that's what you did. What I aspire and tell students to do is get your life and your job as mixed up as possible.
Oh, that's so, yeah. Somebody said the other day to me that they were distinct between working and partying, and I've never had that distinction.
Yeah.
My work is a party, and when I go to party, I'm working.
Beautiful. Last question, Joel, and I appreciate this. Has been truly enlightening for me, and I'm grateful. What gives you the most optimism?
Oh, this is good. Now I'm going to get into some sappy shit. But I have an incredible belief in the indomitable human spirit, and that is what I see around me. That gives me, the optimism, hope for the future. Is this element that is inculcated in all of us that wants more, wants greater, wants love, wants peace, seeks excellence. And those are the things that make me think that everything's going to be all right.
Dude, I'm so there with you. In fact, the first question, Joel, was, what is the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And they asked Groucho Marx the last question at the end of his life, what gives you the most optimism? And he says, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with you. I am really grateful, Joel. Thank you so much. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope we can keep talking forever and ever.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate the time.
Really cool. Thanks.